Every secret society in history, the Eleusinian mysteries, the Hermetic orders, the inner circles of ancient Egypt, they all had one thing in common. They made initiates wait, sometimes years, sometimes decades, before you were allowed into the inner chamber, before anyone whispered the real knowledge in your ear. You had to prove something. Not that you were smart enough, not that you were loyal enough. You had to prove that you had survived yourself. Hold on to that, because by the end of this video, that one sentence is going to completely change how you see both ancient history and your own life. Here is the story most people carry around about mystery schools. They were secret because the knowledge was dangerous. Priests and initiates hid the truth about the universe, about God, about the afterlife, about cosmic forces, because if ordinary people knew it, the church would lose power, or civilization would collapse, or something catastrophic would happen. The secret was cosmic, the secret was theological. That story is exciting, it sells books, it gets clicks, but there is a problem with it. If you actually go back and study what initiates described after their experiences, the language used in the Eleusinian mysteries, in Hermetic philosophy, in the Pythagorean schools, the thing they kept returning to was not information about the universe. It was a transformation of the self. Initiates did not come out saying, "I now know a secret about God." They came out saying, "I am not the same person I was." That distinction matters more than most people realize. And here's where things get interesting. Take the Eleusinian mysteries, the most famous of the Greek mystery schools. For 2,000 years, people traveled to Eleusis outside Athens to go through their initiation. Philosophers, generals, emperors, some of the most brilliant minds in the ancient world went through this ritual, and yet almost none of them described what happened inside. For a long time, historians assumed that was because of a vow of secrecy. Maybe, but there is another possibility that is far more interesting. Maybe they did not talk about it because the experience was not a set of facts you could hand someone. It was something that had to happen inside you. It was psychological, not informational. The rituals involved days of fasting, sleep deprivation, emotional intensity, darkness, and then a sudden overwhelming experience of light. Modern researchers now believe these rituals were engineered to force a specific psychological state, a confrontation with the parts of yourself you had spent your whole life avoiding. The ancient Greeks had a word for what the initiate encountered in that darkness. They called it the underworld. Jung would later call it the unconscious. They were describing the same room. Carl Jung spent decades studying alchemy, Gnosticism, Hermeticism, and the symbolism of ancient mystery traditions. And the conclusion he kept arriving at was uncomfortable for people on both sides of the spiritual and scientific divide. He believed the ancients were not doing bad science when they talked about transformation, purification, and the union of opposites. They were doing psychology without the clinical vocabulary to describe it. Jung developed a concept called individuation. It is the process by which a person becomes a whole, integrated self, not by eliminating their darkness, their fears, their contradictions, but by consciously meeting and absorbing them. He called the unacknowledged, suppressed side of the personality the shadow, and he was explicit. The shadow does not disappear when you ignore it. It gets stronger. It runs your life from behind the curtain while you think you are in control. The alchemical process of turning lead into gold. Jung read that as a metaphor for individuation. Taking the raw, base, unexamined material of the self and consciously transforming it into something coherent, whole, integrated. The mystery schools were running individuation programs. They just did not call it that. Now you might be asking, if this is just psychology, why all the secrecy? Why the oaths, the veils, the initiatory structure? This is where most people make a mistake. They assume the secrecy was about protecting the information from outsiders. It was not. The secrecy was about protecting the process. Think about it this way. Imagine you told someone who had never meditated, who had never done any internal work, who was completely identified with their ego and their social mask. Imagine you told that person, the moment they walked in the door, "We're going to strip away everything you think you are. We're going to take you into your own darkness. Everything you've been running from your entire life is going to be standing right in front of you." Most people would leave. Most people would not consent to that experience. The preparation phases, the years of prerequisite work, the slow building of trust and psychological resilience. That was not gatekeeping for the sake of power. That was making sure the person would not shatter when they finally looked. You do not hand someone a mirror in a dark room and say, "Now look," unless they are ready to handle what they see. Here's what is remarkable once you see it. Almost every major symbol across ancient mystery traditions maps directly onto a psychological process. The descent into the underworld, in Greek myth, in Egyptian death rites, in Mesopotamian stories, that is the confrontation with the shadow. The hero goes down. The hero faces impossible things. The hero comes back changed. Joseph Campbell codified this as the hero's journey, but he was transparent about the debt he owed to Jung. The myth was always a psychological instruction manual dressed in narrative clothing. The union of opposites, the sacred marriage, the alchemical conjunction of sun and moon, masculine and feminine. That is what Jung called the integration of the anima and animus, the reconciliation of the warring inner forces that most people manage by just suppressing one side entirely. Even the language of death and rebirth, which runs through almost every mystery tradition on the planet, maps onto what psychologists today call ego dissolution. The old rigid, defended self has to die before the more integrated self can emerge. That experience, however it happens, through ritual, through crisis, through sustained inner work, is reliably described as both terrifying and profound. It always has been. The ancients were not using metaphor as decoration. The metaphor was the map. Here is something worth sitting with. The major world religions as they exist today, particularly in their popular mainstream forms, largely stripped out the experiential, transformational dimension of their own traditions. What was left was theology, doctrine, belief systems, the external architecture of the building without the interior room it was built to lead you into. The mystical branches of these traditions, Sufism in Islam, Kabbalah in Judaism, Christian mysticism, Vajrayana Buddhism, are the parts that retain the psychological core. And what do they all emphasize? Direct experience, inner transformation, the dissolution of the small self into something larger, not as a metaphor, as a practice. The mystery school model did not disappear. It went underground into these lineages, or it secularized itself into psychotherapy and depth psychology. Jung was not inventing something new when he described the shadow and individuation. He was translating an ancient technology into a modern language. The knowledge was not lost. It was just waiting for a vocabulary we could accept. This next part might surprise you, because there is a question underneath all of this that actually matters for your life right now. What happens to a person, or a culture, that never goes through the individuation process? Jung was not subtle about his answer. He thought it was dangerous. A person who has never confronted their shadow does not become harmless. They become someone who acts out of their shadow without knowing it. Their repressed fears and impulses do not vanish. They project outward. They see enemies everywhere. They are drawn to certainty and rigidity because genuine ambiguity, genuine complexity feels threatening to an unexamined self. At the cultural level, Jung believed this was how entire societies ended up in collective madness. A population of individuals who have never done the inner work will outsource their unacknowledged darkness onto other groups. History has no shortage of examples. The mystery school initiates who came out of that chamber at Eleusis. They could not unsee what they had seen. They had met the thing inside themselves they were most afraid of, and they had survived it. That changes the way a person moves through the world. It changes what they are afraid of. It changes who they are willing to become. So let us go back to the word that gets thrown around constantly in spiritual content, enlightenment. We treat it like a destination, a permanent state of bliss and peace that the most evolved human beings eventually reach, a kind of spiritual graduation. But look at what the word actually suggests. Enlightenment. The process of bringing something into the light, not reaching a place of light. Bringing something dark into consciousness. Every mystery tradition that used enlightenment language was talking about the same movement, not the acquisition of cosmic secrets from outside yourself. The illumination of what was already inside you, including especially the parts you did not want to look at, the shadow, the wound, the unlived life. The genuine self buried under decades of performance and protection. The initiates at Eleusis did not come back knowing something about the universe that they did not know before. They came back knowing something about themselves. And it turned out that was the only knowledge that could actually change anything. So here is the answer to the question we started with. The thing the mystery schools protected, the reason for the oaths, the years of preparation, the carefully guarded rituals, was not a formula. It was not a secret name of God. It was not a hidden history of human origins. The secret was a process, a repeatable, teachable, deeply uncomfortable process of meeting yourself whole, the celebrated parts and the disowned parts together, and emerging from that meeting as something more integrated, more real, more fully alive than you were before. They protected it not because it was dangerous in the wrong hands, They protected it because it could not be transmitted in the wrong order. You cannot hand someone their own shadow and call it wisdom. You have to walk them to the door. You have to make sure they are ready to open it. And then you have to let them go in alone. The mystery is not out there. It never was. If this reframe shifted something for you, the video on shadow work and how to actually start this process in your own life is right there. Watch that next. And if this is the kind of content that makes you stop and think, a like and a subscribe means more of it lands where it should.